거리가 양세형 제치고. 새로운 파일법이 나왔어요. 새로운 파일법이 나왔습니다.
This is like me coming back from vacation, just throw a basketball right at my face. That's how I feel today.
Well, it's official. Nobody's going to beat the Warriors. If that can't stop them, nothing can.
If that giant inflatable thing can't stop them, hey, welcome to SI Now. It's Monday, August 7th. I am Maggie Gray alongside Robin Lundberg. Robin, grab your pack of Marlboros. Jay Cutler is back. The Dolphins lured Cutler out of retirement and a job at Fox after Ryan Tannehill suffered a knee injury. Now, Cutler teams up with his former offensive coordinator in Chicago, Adam Gase. Now, the last time Cutler and Gase were together, it was some pretty sweet music here. He had his second highest completion rate of his career at just over 64%. He had the fourth most passing yards in his career, just about 3,700. 21 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, but that was 7 fewer than his previous season. So, Robin, is Jay Cutler the best option for the Miami Dolphins?
I'm not mad at this move. Look, sometimes Cutler, I think, gets devalued just a little bit. He's not anywhere near a great quarterback, but perhaps because when he's bad, he's so bad, and because there is something about him that just feels utterly uninspiring. He's an easy target for punchlines and the like. It's more a commentary on the state of quarterbacking in the NFL, I guess, where you have to go to the retired rather than the active pool of talent. But you mentioned before the Gase fit with Cutler makes this seem natural. Now, whenever a quarterback spot does open up and it's not filled with Colin Kaepernick, that does open up that conversation as well.
It does, and I think it should, but not necessarily in this instance. I really believe that the Dolphins would have taken a look and probably did take a look at Colin Kaepernick, but Jay Cutler, I mean, it's not like he's been retired for so long. This isn't Vinny Testaverde off the couch. I mean, he really did just leave, and it was a salary cap cut by the Bears. I mean, he was coming off of a shoulder injury. It just does seem to make sense. I don't think there was anything going on behind the scenes. I don't think that Stephen Ross, the owner, and Mike Tannenbaum were in a room somewhere saying, gosh, we just can't sign Kaepernick because that would be terrible, even though he did wear a T-shirt that had Fidel Castro on it, along with some other people on it, Malcolm X and others, that he would have to explain to that Florida community. But I do believe that this is a move purely based on fit. I think that Cutler knows Gase. They know the system together. It's going to be the fastest sort of Band-Aid over a bullet wound that they can possibly do. And I don't know if Cutler's going to start for the whole season. We don't know what Tannehill's prognosis is at this time, if he's going to have surgery or what. But I think this was the best option. I do. But I believe that there is something weird going on with Kaepernick. It'd be hard to ignore that at this point.
I agree. This isn't the case study for Colin Kaepernick being blackballed, if you will, by the NFL, because you can make the argument for Cutler. I think those two guys are about on the same plane right now. But it is another job and another quarterback. So I think it's sort of, people are just being bombarded over the course of the offseason where they see other guys who they know Kaepernick's better get jobs. You hear about the Ravens opening. You hear about the Dolphins opening. So while it's not the Dolphins' fault necessarily that Kaepernick doesn't have a job, it does feel like way too many jobs have opened up and Kaepernick still doesn't have one. So therefore, there's going to be a reaction anytime someone gets one, even if you can justify it.
Yeah, I mean, Seattle, Baltimore, Buffalo, I feel like all those would have been good fits for Kaepernick. Meanwhile, we are streaming on Facebook Live. So we want to know, what do you think? Would you rather have Cutler or Kaepernick for your team? And if you're a Dolphins fan, even better. Let's welcome in the editor-in-chief of the MMQB, Peter King. Peter, great to see you back from training camp. Love the column this morning. You talked a lot about this Jay Cutler fit with Adam Gase. Are the Dolphins a playoff team, though, with Cutler under center?
I probably won't pick them to make the playoffs, Maggie, but, to me, I mean, this is the only move they could have made, assuming that he would have taken the job. To debate Kaepernick versus Cutler would be an interesting debate, on probably on whatever 31 other teams. But I mean, Jay Cutler had his best overall season, excuse me, and was at his most disciplined in 2015 when Adam Gase coached him. I mean, he was a top 12 to 15 NFL quarterback. So you have a choice. You can either take a guy who knows everything about your offense, who you've worked with, who had his best year in the NFL under you, and who is a great deep ball thrower with 3 deep threats at wide receiver. Or you could take a guy who's a lightning rod, who the business side of your building is going to say, oh my God, please don't sign this guy, for fear of, fan reaction. And then you also say, oh, by the way, and in a month, get him ready either to start or to back up Matt Moore. See, here's the thing that I think people are forgetting if they say the Dolphins should have signed Colin Kaepernick. Well, Matt Moore, if they signed Colin Kaepernick, Matt Moore would start for the Dolphins, and they would bring in Kaepernick as the backup. Whereas Cutler comes in and you're bringing him into play. So I just don't see the debate in any way in Miami. Now, I do see the debate in other places, and I get it, but not in Miami.
Speaking of those other places, Peter, do you think the season will start without Colin Kaepernick having a team?
I think it really depends right now on 2 things. On the stomach of the Baltimore Ravens to bring him in and to take whatever pushback they're going to get from their fans and particularly their corporate community in Baltimore that they deal with, because it's clear that there's a lot of people, especially in the corporate world, who have great disdain for Colin Kaepernick. So, I mean, can you take that part of it? And that's number one. Number 2, who's going to get hurt in the next month? I mean, that's what you just can't predict. If every quarterback stays healthy and the Ravens don't sign Kaepernick, I don't think he's going to be on a roster opening day. But, I mean, those are 2 gigantic ifs, particularly the injury one.
Do you think there's any chance he never plays in the NFL again?
Yeah, there's a chance, but I think it's more likely than not that he's going to get a shot somewhere, and very likely this year.
Peter, let's transition away from that storyline and head to another one. We know you are looking most forward to visiting Packers camp, and you got a chance to do that. You wrote about it today. You write that Green Bay should thank their lucky stars that they have Aaron Rodgers, considering really the economic growth that is centered around the team and him being the face of the team. But even Rodgers admits this to you. He said it would be disappointing if we were only able to win 1 Super Bowl in my time here. What happens to all this goodwill if Rodgers never wins a 2nd Super Bowl ring?
Well, here's the way I sort of look at the Packers. I remember covering the Philadelphia Eagles sort of in their prime with McNabb and Owens and a bunch of those really good players, 12, 13 years ago. I had a very good defense. And I remember going to Eagles camp every year thinking that this year, could be the year that they win it all. And, I think the most that you can do as, sort of as a franchise every year is to go to training camp with a legitimate chance to win the Super Bowl. The Packers have a legitimate chance to win the Super Bowl this year. Now, let's say Rodgers plays, and I'll pick a number, another 7 years, although he said that he may play another 10 years. He feels so good right now. But let's say he plays 7 more years. I think anybody who watches football would say, yeah, it would be a disappointment if Aaron Rodgers only won 1 Super Bowl with the Green Bay Packers. But I would also just say this, they're going to win, I think, probably on average somewhere between 10 and 13 games every year. And so, to me, I don't know if they're going to win another Super Bowl. And of course, it would be disappointing if they didn't. But all I know is that they're going to contend every year. And I'll say one thing about sort of the logistics and the expectations. What's so incredible about what's happened in Green Bay is I took a tour of this hotel across the street from Lambeau Field. That is quite literally, you can have a luxury suite and have a tailgate inside that luxury suite that has a terrace to the outside. And you can stand there and do your tailgating in a luxurious way, if you choose, and be about 80 yards from the entry gate to your seat at Lambeau Field. they have done so much there to make it a big league atmosphere that I think anybody who hasn't been there in 3 or 4 years is really going to be shocked when they see it.
That's not exactly drinking Milwaukee's best ice out of a garbage can, but we'll take it, Peter. We'll take it.
Now, you wrote in MMQB in favor of brevity for Hall of Fame speeches. I think Jerry Jones is still talking, suggesting a 22-minute cap. So we thought, in the spirit of that, we'd see how you do under time constraints, seeing if you can answer 3 training camp questions of the teams you've been around in 30 seconds. We were just talking Packers, so we'll start there.
Start the clock.
There's some talk Jamal Williams is pushing Ty Montgomery in camp. Is Montgomery a legit starting running back?
Ty Montgomery not only is a legit starting running back, but is going to gain over 1,000 yards and be a good receiving weapon out of the backfield as well.
Okay, Minnesota, you wrote about how odd it was to go to camp and not see Adrian Peterson. But after going 8-8 last year, Peter, will the Vikings improve on their 500 record this year?
I believe they will. Danielle Hunter is going to turn into a great NFL pass rusher opposite Everson Griffin, and Dalvin Cook is going to be a legitimate, strong running back for that team and will be a good replacement for Adrian Peterson.
Okay, we'll talk about the future of Teddy Bridgewater another day. Final one, are we sleeping on the 49ers, Peter, by automatically making the Jets the worst team in the NFL? Could it actually be San Francisco?
There's no way that 49ers are worse than the Jets. I mean, with Kyle Shanahan calling the plays and a fairly accurate quarterback in Brian Hoyer executing it, I told somebody the other day, Maggie, with your second quarterback in the last round of this draft, take Brian Hoyer. He's going to put up some good numbers this year.
I think we did it.
Yeah.
I think we did it. Bravo, Peter, but we have a bonus question for you, Robin.
Yeah, bonus question. We know the NFL is headed to Vegas. If you watch the show Ballers, you'd think The Rock was responsible. But SI is going to be analyzing prospective destinations for NFL expansion teams. Where would you put an NFL expansion team?
The next NFL team should be in London. They've answered just about every question in putting regular season games over there, selling them all out. They've had 21 regular season games, including this year, and they've sold them all out but one. And that one got about 72,000 people. There's enough fans over there to support it. The NFL is itching to try it and should try it. I'd say no later than 2023.
All right. The London Jaguars it is. I've got to get used to saying that. I think it's going to be that team.
Jacksonville
Jaguars of London. Peter King of the MMQB. Thank you, Peter. Appreciate your time.
You're welcome, guys. Thank you.
All right. Now, if you're asking me where I would put an expansion team, I'm going to go the opposite. I'm going to go Mexico City. I still like looking outside of the U.S. because I think you have to expand abroad. But the last time they played the Monday Night Football game in Mexico City, it was a sellout. Over 76,000 people were there. So this comes from ESPN. Okay, Mexico has an NFL fan base that they're saying is 23 million. That's the largest number outside the United States, and the number combined of the populations of New York City, LA, Chicago, Philadelphia, Houston, and San Jose. So you have a big population, about 9 million people live there. They already are familiar with American football. You don't have to teach anybody the rules like we had to, over in London and other places. Like if you go to Shanghai, you're going to have to educate the fan base. Don't have to do that in Mexico. And I think you would be wise to go to Mexico City if I'm the NFL.
I'll stick with North America. What about Toronto?
No.
I mean, it is the third biggest city between the United States and Canada, the largest without a team, has a team in every other sport, has a nickname in the Six. There's a football league that plays up there somewhere. So why not the Toronto, whatever you want to call them?
Robin, you can't put a team that close to the Buffalo Bills. You just can't do it. And as someone who grew up a Bills fan, it's just too close. When they decided to put Bills games in Toronto, it was a complete disaster. Total disaster. You have to play outside of Buffalo. That's the rules. You cannot give the opponent the weather advantage of being in a dome.
You know what? You're right. Because when Buffalo fans try to tell me that they're the only team that actually plays in New York, I'm like, come on, guys. You play in Canada.
We kind of do. Yeah, we kind of do. It's basically Canada. Robin, did you know that 10 years ago today, Barry Bonds broke Hank Aaron's all-time home run record? It came in the fifth inning off Mike Bassick of the Nationals. It happened at AT&T Park. You may remember Bud Selig, the commissioner, not in attendance that day. Tonight, there will be a video tribute to the accomplishment. Here is a quick look back at just what the scene was like on August 7th, 2007.
And Bonds hits one high. Hits it deep. It is out of here. 7:56. Bonds stands alone. He is on top of the all-time home run list.
This record is not tainted at all. At all. Period. And you guys can say whatever you want.
Okay, well, despite what Bonds said, less than 3 months after breaking the record, he was indicted by a federal grand jury for allegedly lying under oath about his PED use. He was also convicted on one count of obstruction. That was by a San Francisco jury, which was reversed on appeal. Now, Bonds actually never officially retired. He's worked with the Marlins and now the Giants as a hitting coach. Robin, how do you view Bonds' accomplishment now 10 years later?
Barry Bonds is the best baseball player I've ever seen. I mean, his numbers, I call them enhanced Bonds. They were cartoon character-like. One of my favorite stats ever is that on any given swing in his prime, in that second prime, he was only slightly more likely to swing and miss than he was to get an extra base hit. And I saw two different incarnations of Barry Bonds. The argument was Ken Griffey Jr. or Bonds. He was that kind of player. 40-40 club, all that stuff, MVPs. So he very easily could have been, and I think even was, the best player then. So he was the best before cheating, and then he was the best at cheating. And what I mean by that is not getting caught. I mean, he saw guys like Sosa and McGuire start putting up these gargantuan numbers, and he goes, wait a second, I'm better than those guys. Watch this. And then he went on to become Babe Ruth. So he was at one point Ken Griffey Jr., another point Babe Ruth, and I get it. It's not something we should celebrate as far as cheating to gain an advantage, but as far as watching a career, Barry Bonds is indisputably, for me, the best baseball player of all time.
First of all, can we go, I mean, look how he looked in that press conference. I mean, that's crazy that we took it as truth that guys just sort of look like that. Meanwhile, all these years later, baseball players don't look like that. There are two stories in sports so far that since I've been doing this as a profession, where the majority of the public sentiment has changed, and it seems like almost instantaneously, maybe a year or two, where public sentiment just swung from one way all the way to the other. One very good thing was gay athletes. I feel like at one point, not too long ago, people saw that as an issue or something we had to overcome. Now I feel like a gay athlete would be accepted in every sport and should be accepted in every sport. The other one is PEDs. I feel like the public sentiment has changed on this so much. From the day that Bonds hit that home run, people used to throw syringes out onto the field. He was a pariah. Now I feel like people are upset that he's being kept out of the hall, that because of what you're saying, his accomplishments with a little bit of time and perspective, we're seeing them for what they are. Now, I see the Hall of Fame as a museum. I feel like everything should be represented there. So I feel like he should be in the Hall of Fame, and we should be taking a look at what do we know now, 10 years after Barry Bonds did this, hit this home run and had this accomplishment. Not let's chastise, this is just all part of the history of the game. That's how I feel like it should be treated.
Well, every year the Hall of Fame becomes like National PED Day, right? Because that's what you really talk about, who didn't get in rather than who got in. If they start putting these guys in, there'll be 1 year of uproar, and then it'll be gone. It'll be over with. And there shouldn't be a Hall of Fame if Barry Bonds isn't in it. I used to think, hey, can we distinguish the guys who we know cheated and became Hall of Famers as a result? You really can't. If they have Hall of Fame numbers, put them in. The audience is intelligent enough to sort it out for themselves. It's not like someone's going to go to the Hall of Fame museum, see Bonds, and say, oh, a pristine, everyone knows the backstory. As far as what you said before about people becoming more accepting, I think there's a couple of reasons. Baseball, they started looking at Major League Baseball and going, hey, you guys acted all innocent when you probably knew what was going on and you wanted A-Rod and Bonds to take the fall.
Yeah.
And then the other, people of our age who saw that, and that was the heyday of baseball, are now becoming the voices and the authority figures, and we're going, you're just going to erase everything we saw like it didn't count? It's insulting.
Yeah, I guess because we realize how much, I think older generations do too, but it mattered. It really did. In some ways, it saved the sport. I mean, what McGuire and Sosa did, you hate to sound like one of those old people who talk about rock music, but if you weren't there, you couldn't know the magic. It really was that special.
Woodstock, you had to be there.
You had to be there. Who knows? But I really feel that way about the steroid era. I mean, it did make things exciting. And here's the other thing in terms of the hall and stuff like that. We can see you guys commenting on Facebook, so keep it coming. you have other people who are getting in off the backs of people who are using steroids. I mean, I first started to think about this when Bobby Cox and Tony La Russa got in. It's like, what are we doing here? We're just letting these managers in. Yes, they had to make decisions, and they have Hall of Fame careers in their own right, but, I mean, they were the ones presiding over the steroid era. Bud Selig just got in. He's the one who was the commissioner of the steroid era.
You mentioned how they looked, right? These guys might as well have been going up to the plate in torn purple pants like the Hulk, right? It was obvious, it was glaring. So to pretend like everyone wasn't at least complicit passively is a farce. It's a farce.
And even sports writers and people who worked at Sports Illustrated have said that. I mean, they realized that it was starting to come, and then Tom Verducci broke the story about Ken Caminiti, and that sort of opened up the floodgates for a lot of things. But, you know, I think while it was happening, first of all, I don't think we did know as much about PEDs then. It seemed like it was more for like Olympic sports and track and field stuff, swimming. But I think we're just more educated now. Back then, I still believe we weren't as educated, and you wanted to believe. That was the thing. You look back at the numbers now, they're insane. They're ridiculous. Do you think anyone will ever break Bonds' record?
That's going to be tough. Not without the use of some PEDs.
Oh, jeez. Good luck, Aaron Judge. We're all rooting for you. He's doing it clean, we presume, but I think he might be the only one. All right, that's where we're going to leave the Bonds conversation, although Mike Curry says Bonds was 190 pounds soaking wet with Pirates and is a Hall of Choker. RJ says he's a first ballot. So keep those coming, guys. Obviously, a lot of discussion there. Meantime, we should talk a little college football, shouldn't we?
Let's do it. Top 25s are being released, and the college football season is less than a month away. To get a preview of what is to come, we welcome in our college football writer, Andy Staples. Andy, Florida State and Alabama kick off the season September 2nd. When we get to the end of the season and look back, how important will that game be?
It's pretty interesting, Ron, because the loser, as long as it's a close game, is not out of the playoff hunt, obviously, because both teams could be very good. Both teams could potentially win their conference title. So if it's close, I don't think losing that game necessarily hurts you. You know, we saw last year that Ohio State got really rewarded for going to Norman, Oklahoma, and beating the eventual Big 12 champ. That's why Ohio State made the playoff, even though they didn't win the Big Ten. So I think the committee looks kindly on games like this, and I don't think they're going to hurt anybody too bad if they lose close in a game between two really good teams. Now, it leaves very little margin for error for the team that loses. So let's say Florida State were to lose, you got to beat Clemson at that point. You got to roll through the ACC. Or if Alabama loses, you got to roll through the SEC. But you're not out of it yet.
This is no disrespect to DeAndre Francois or Jalen Hurts, but Andy, how would you characterize this quarterback class? And I'm talking about guys like Sam Darnold, Josh Rosen. How good could this class be?
Oh, this could be a very good class. You know, we haven't seen Rosen since he got hurt last year. I'm excited to see what he does in Jed Fish's offense at UCLA. Darnold just had an amazing season. You know, didn't mention Trace McSorley at Penn State, who had a great end of the year. Nick Fitzgerald at Mississippi State is one that I think everybody needs to be watching because he had a season last year where he ran for 1,300 yards, okay? The only two SEC quarterbacks that ran for more than that in one season were Cam Newton in 2010, Johnny Manziel in 2012. They won the Heisman in both of those years. Fitzgerald, if he can throw a little better, and he's still developing as a passer because he played in an option offense in high school, he may wind up throwing for 3,000 yards and running for 1,300 yards. Those are Heisman-type numbers right there. So, and then there's just a lot of interesting quarterbacks around the country where you think, okay, they could make big leaps. Jacob Eason at Georgia, Jake Bentley at South Carolina, Mason Rudolph at Oklahoma State is going to have a loaded cast around him, and I think he's going to put up huge numbers. And then you got Baker Mayfield back at Oklahoma. So this is going to be a great year for quarterbacks.
Yeah, looking forward to that. Meanwhile, at Clemson, though, Deshaun Watson no longer there. He's in the NFL. His replacement is Kelly Bryant. Some big shoes to fill. What will be the most difficult part of this transition for the Tigers?
Well, winning the job first, because Kelly Bryant isn't replacing anybody yet. Dabo Swinney keeps saying, well, if the season started today, but the season doesn't start today. So Zarek Cooper, who is a redshirt freshman, and Hunter Johnson, who's a true freshman, still have a shot to win that job. And I'm curious to see what lessons Clemson took away from Deshaun Watson's freshman year in 2014, because that was the year they started Cole Stout at the beginning of the season. Watson didn't become the full-time starter until game 4. Had Watson started the Florida State game that year, they would have won the ACC. So I do wonder if Cooper or Johnson is close to Bryant as they get close to that decision time. Will they go with the guy that they feel has the highest ceiling, or will they go with the guy who has the most experience? Now, it could be that Bryant has the most experience and the highest ceiling, but I'm curious to see if they face that decision, do they make it the same way they did in 2014, or do they change because of what happened in 2014?
Speaking of high ceilings, who's your Heisman favorite this year? Can Lamar Jackson repeat?
Well, there's a reason Archie Griffin's the only repeat Heisman winner. It's really hard. Lamar Jackson is going to face probably unreasonable expectations in terms of getting into the Heisman race, staying in the Heisman race. Usually we feel like the guy who won the Heisman has to be better than he was the year before. Now, Lamar Jackson may be better than he was last year. He didn't get much help from his blockers toward the end of last season. If he gets better offensive line play, he might actually put up better numbers. But I mentioned Nick Fitzgerald earlier. That's a guy everybody needs to watch. Sam Darnold, going to put up big numbers. The two guys at Penn State, Trace McSorley and Saquon Barkley. And then a guy who, we feel like he's been around forever. He ought to have a PhD by now. J.T. Barrett at Ohio State. He's got a new offensive coordinator in Kevin Wilson. My guess is he will put up better numbers, maybe closer to what he put up his redshirt freshman year. He's a guy, if he ever, can play a full season with the offense humming the way it should be, he should be in New York.
Andy, a lot of players go to college for 7 years, right? He's going to get the Case Keenum Award for how long he can stick around in the collegiate level. Last year it seemed like it was the Washington Huskies who emerged as a surprise team in college football. So who could be this season's sleeper team?
I'm going to go the Washington Huskies because we're handing USC the Pac-12. But I don't feel like Washington is going to drop off that far. Yes, they lost 3 really good DBs to the NFL. Yes, they lost John Ross. But that group they have coming back, they got Jake Browning at quarterback. Vita Vea at defensive end is a guy that everybody's going to be talking about come draft time next year. He's a 6'4", 6'5", 350-pound guy that runs a 4.8 40. He does freaky things. And, we've just decided, I guess, that USC is going to roll through the Pac-12. I'm not so sure it's going to be that easy for USC. And one of the reasons is they might see Washington in the Pac-12 championship game, and Washington could be sitting there either undefeated or 11-1 and be in position to make the playoff again.
You mentioned that USC's been talked about a lot, but what do you think will be the biggest storyline this season that you'll be keeping an eye on?
I think the really interesting one is, can anybody compete with Alabama in the SEC? It's not good for the SEC to have Alabama being that far ahead of everybody else. And it feels like right now it's a little bit of an Alabama and the 13 dwarf situation. So whether it's Auburn with Jarrett Stidham coming in at quarterback and possibly the defense being as good as it was last year, or LSU with new coach, new head coach in Ed Orgeron, new offensive coordinator Matt Canada, maybe they kind of unlock those playmakers on offense who were just kind of tied up at the end of the Les Miles era and didn't really get to do much. Maybe those teams, maybe it's Georgia that takes the leap. Maybe Florida figures out its quarterback situation and the offense blossoms there. But somebody in the SEC needs to be able to compete with Alabama. It cannot be Alabama just rolling through. The one team in the last 3 years that's been able to deal with Alabama in the SEC is Ole Miss, and they have all kinds of problems, obviously. So I think somebody else has to say, hey, look, we're not going to let them just completely dominate this league. And it's up to LSU, Auburn, Georgia, Florida. Somebody needs to step in and make that competition interesting. And also, if that happens, that's better for Alabama as well, because Alabama doesn't want to win a league that's viewed as down, because what if Alabama has a loss? What if they're being compared against another league champion for a playoff spot? They want to win a league that's considered one of the best. And then you win the league, you're in the playoff, no problem. So that would be good for the whole SEC if one of those 4 teams, or 4 of those 4 teams I mentioned, would be challengers legitimately for Alabama.
Yeah, they have a lot of ground to make up, as it looks like Alabama is going to be running away with this thing. As we sit here now in preseason, Andy, we got through the whole segment without talking barbecue. Bad job by us. We will rectify that the next time.
We can do it for like an hour and a half. We can just do a special.
We should. Andy Staples, thanks so much, senior college football writer. Appreciate that. A lot of fun. College football almost here. Meanwhile, stunt woman Jessie Graff has gone farther than any other woman in the history of American Ninja Warrior. This season, airing Mondays on 8 p.m. on NBC, Graff is back, trying to conquer a new, tougher course. We recently spent time training with her in a parkour gym. And let me say, you'll be hard-pressed to find a better athlete anywhere. Watch this.
This woman redefining strong. Put this on Instagram. Put this on Twitter. The internet is about to blow up. Jessie Graff. She's gonna make history. History.
I wanted to be an action hero on TV ever since I was a little kid. I was doing gymnastics, pole vaulting, martial arts, flying trapeze, all kinds of circus, climbing, cliff diving, anything like that. And when someone told me that stunts was a separate job and that actors don't usually get to do stunts, I kind of reevaluated and realized that the stunts was the part that I loved most. When I first did Ninja Warrior, I was just doing it for fun as a random side thing because I really wanted to play on this obstacle course and had no idea that it took so many of the skills I've been doing my whole life and put them on one course. And when it went so well, I had so much fun and everyone there was so nice that I just got addicted to it.
Yes! History is made!
I placed higher than any woman had ever placed on the show. This is one of the only sports where the men do compete directly against the women. We have all the same distances, stats, standards. They don't give us any kind of handicap. They don't change the course for us. And so if I place second, I beat, the other 129 competitors or whatever it is. Like I beat that many guys and I get to see exactly how I stack up among the men. And that's a really exciting thing to do. I think I've gotten stronger. The big thing I'm working on is grip strength. I'm gonna do as many pull-ups as I can in one set. I'm gonna hang on the bar after I can't do any more pull-ups and shake out an arm. Don't touch the ground, shake out an arm. See if you can do one more pull-up and keep going until my fingers peel off the bar, and that's where I max out.
Well, no woman went farther than she did last season, and Jessie says she feels even stronger this year.
I'm really excited about this season because there are so many amazing, strong women, and for us, it's all really just about beating the course. There's new obstacles designed by fans of the show, and gosh, this year's a little intimidating for me because I feel like I performed at my absolute best last year. I think it's gonna get harder this year, so I'm definitely nervous and hugely excited to keep testing my limits.
And you can watch Jessie tonight on NBC at 8 p.m. All right, Robin, truthful, how many obstacles could you get through?
I think I could do some of the running and jumping stuff, maybe run up the wall. I'd like to try that, incline thing. I'd like to give a shot at that. I could not do the hanging stuff, especially the racking of the bar up a level and a level and a level. My deltoids wouldn't go for that.
I'd last about 4 seconds on this thing. I might be able to do the jump across the water one, but after that, I couldn't even do the monkey bars at this point. All those years playing tennis, and I have absolutely nothing to show for it. That's a little sad.
We are not Ninja Warriors.
No, we're not Ninja Warriors. You can watch Jessie, though, as I said, tonight on NBC. Matt Eisman, of course, friend of the show, does a great job announcing that show. That's it. That's it for this Monday episode of SI Now. We'll be back tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern, of course. But until then, stick with SI.com for all the latest news and headlines, and follow us on Twitter at SI Now Live.
Let's go do some pull-ups.
I know. I'm going to go sit in the back, drink some coffee.